News Channel 5 Network. This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. Look, we have a full table here discussing a very important issue. How serious is Nashville about ending homelessness? How can this even be done? That's what we're talking about tonight. We certainly want to hear from you. We have a good group of experts up here. Happy to have Judith Tackett, Metro Social Services, Homeless Impact Division. Judith, thank you for being here. Bobby Watts, CEO of the National Healthcare for the Homeless, a national organization. Bobby, thank you for being here.
Glad.
And Ingrid McIntyre with Open Table Nashville. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you
for having us.
Here. So, where do we stand with homelessness right now in Nashville? And how serious do you think we are as a city when it comes to ending homelessness? Judith, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this is actually a good time to have us here. Just about a year ago, the city and the community got together and built a new homelessness planning council, just to really look at what does governance look like, what do we need to do to really build that foundation and be serious about homelessness, to use that term. And so the first year, really, we focused on getting organized and building a strategic plan. We are coming out with that next month, really. We're presenting that right now to the Homelessness Planning Council from a committee. And it is, I think what we also need to define is, what does ending homelessness mean? So for people that we are working with, and when I say we, it's really the community and community providers, it means ending their homelessness. And I believe that we can do that for everybody in one way or another. And for a system, it's about looking at the time. People will lose their housing, but shrinking that time it takes us as a system, as a city, as a community, for people to get back into housing.
So there's a new plan that's about to come out, is that right?
Yes.
All right. Let me ask each of you, how serious do you think Nashville is about ending homelessness? Good, there's a new plan coming out. Bobby and then Ingrid.
I'm a relative newcomer to Nashville, been here for about 2.5 years, but I've worked with homeless services basically my whole career, and I have been really impressed. I was glad to be part of the strategic planning committee to help develop this new plan, and have the advantage of working with a national organization. So we work with our partners in many parts of the country, and I think Nashville has a few things really going for it. I was really impressed during the Homeless Persons Memorial Day observance when we heard the mayor, we heard several city council people talk about the failure to house our most vulnerable neighbors to the point where many died was a failure of all of us. And that kind of collective will is a first step, and that recognition is a first step, which is not everywhere. So I was really pleased and encouraged to see it here, and Nashville, to the extent that you follow through on that, should really feel commended for having a good foundation to start.
And Ingrid, how do you think? How is Nashville doing? How serious is Nashville about ending homelessness?
I've been doing this work about 10 years, and I guess I think that we are more serious now than we ever have been, and actually have the leadership that we need, I think, to make that happen. If we can all sort of come together to support that as a city, and realize that means some hard decisions have to be made. It's not just, how do we clothe someone or how do we feed someone, but like, how do we make sure that someone has supportive, permanent housing that they need, that will support them and help them stay in housing, right? And I think that takes a lot of resources. And so I think that we have a good foundation with which to spring from, and I hope that we have, the support from other community members, other players with all the parts, right? The housing and all the other things. I hope that we can get onto the same page and say, really, it comes down to one thing, and that is that these are people who matter a lot, and it's not fun day after day to have to say no to someone.
Mm-hmm. And it gets to how realistic a goal is it to end homelessness. I remember that there was a report out that we were going to end homelessness by a certain date, 2015, right? We obviously didn't do that. I mean, it's 2019 now, and here we have a new plan. Is it realistic to say we're going to end homelessness in Nashville or in any city?
I think it's really about, we need to look at how are we going to go about doing that. We need to be person-centered, we need to be housing-focused, we need to really use data wisely. And this plan that we are looking at right now, when we look at the previous 10-year plan, I always thought it was a good plan, but it was a wish list to satisfy a lot of people. This new plan is really a 3-year strategic plan that lays the foundation. It's prioritizing. It doesn't talk about by this and this time we have ended, but it talks about what do we need to do to even have better outcomes and better measurements. I have been very vocal for the past 2 years that we just do not have the data to really measure outcomes properly, but we're working, and the city has taken on that database to really start looking at that, building a coordinated entry and knowing people by name.
Yeah.
And really what they need and addressing it one by one.
When you talk about data, where do we stand right now? How many homeless are there? Is it growing? Is it maintaining the same? You know, how many homeless are there, and where do we stand right now?
You're going to get 3 numbers.
Different answers.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
I'm going to do with what we know with the most narrow definition that is an estimate for outdoor count. So we have, it's called a point in time count. It happens every January, 1 night count in shelter outdoors in places not meant for human habitation. And that count decreased over the last year. It's been steadily and slowly decreasing. It decreased by about 14% overall. But this is the narrowest possible count. It's really just touching the surface.
And it's one day of the year.
It's not
in
an
a very
annual.
cold time of the year. So it doesn't maybe make the most accurate
It really
statement.
doesn't.
Yeah.
And it also is not the annual count. It's right now that we can't produce an unduplicated count. So any number that's thrown out there, it may be right, it may not. But we're working on getting that as quickly as possible.
And
So
this
you feel like the number's going down? Is that right?
What we're seeing, because shelter numbers are going down, but when you look at, for example, right now, outdoor numbers will go up because it's summer versus winter. Also, the more we talk about homelessness, the more people see and are aware of people experiencing homelessness, the more complaints we get in, the more the feeling is. We also know that there are about 50% of people experiencing homelessness are new faces. So the more new faces you see, the more anecdotally you think it's going up.
Well, let me ask, as far as where we are, do you think, and I'll ask each of you, where are we right now? Do you have a number that you're comfortable with? Is it going up or down?
I think it's really hard to answer that. I think what we're hoping to do, one of the first things with this strategic plan, is to really get a handle on the data so that we can have a sound basis to make decisions. We have a lot of bits of data, like the point in time count. We have some shelter counts, but we really want to have more comprehensive data to really answer that question authoritatively.
Do you have a feeling or an answer? Is it going up or down?
Well, I don't know about the up or down part, but I think it's more like 20,000 people.
20,000 people?
Yeah,
Okay.
throughout the year, with about 8,000 of those being school children. And that is a broader definition than what Judy was talking about. So that could be people who are couch surfing until their family or friend gets tired of them being there, or people who are doubling up, or living in hotels, or et cetera, et cetera. Those kind of places. And I would guess that actually the number is going up because, like we know, Stadium Inn just closed. So many of our people live there. So many of our people lived there. So that whole building, right, full of people, now, who knows where they are? They're in encampments now, right? There were people in respite there. There were people who were, healing from being in the hospital or trying to get out of the heat, or they have COPD or they have diabetes and need to keep their meds cold, so that, that was their choice for a home, and now it's gone. And that is happening rapidly, I think, throughout our community with different housing options.
And let me ask you, put a face on homelessness. You know, who is it? You're saying 20,000.
Yeah, I don't think that it's everyone now. I see people across the spectrum. It's people who've never been homeless before, which is the most terrifying thing in the world, I would think. And you know, counseling through with someone who this is their first experience is just one of the most devastating conversations to have. It's children and parents who only make minimum wage maybe, and minimum wage is not a living wage, and so no matter if they work 80 hours a week, they can't afford a place to live here. It's, you know, your typical person that you think of pushing a cart down the street. It's people who have lost jobs or came here because they were promised a job and then didn't get one. It's, I mean, across the board. It's young people, right? Youth who've been kicked out of their homes for one reason or another. It is people who maybe have mental health issues, who their families just didn't know what to do, and so now they're out wandering the streets. It's my grandmother, it's your uncle, it's whatever, right? It's all kinds of people on the street.
Yeah, I really appreciate Ingrid making that point. Your question, put a face on it. You can't put a face on it. It's multiple faces. It's the population of people who are experiencing homelessness is very varied from different sources, different parts of society. We do know some things. We do know that if you are poorer to begin with, you're more likely to have that safety net that you have be thinner, and you're likely to fall through into homelessness. We know that if you are a racial minority in this country or in this city, you are more likely to be to experience homelessness. But it is really it really is a mosaic. You can't say a face, it's many, many faces.
And where does mental illness fit in? That's
it is
a big
huge
part, isn't it?
Yes.
At least that has been in the past. You know, again, put a face on homelessness. It's not one face, but what would you say?
It is, I think when we talk about homelessness, it's also, we need to look at the systems that fail people. Yeah. We're talking about healthcare systems that are not sufficient. We're talking about criminal justice. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about, that's kind of where that comes in. And then the other thing is also when we talk, if you lose your housing, and if you cannot find housing and you lose your job and you're sick, at one point mental health will play a role in it, whether you started because of it or whether you now have issues with your mental health, and your stress level is just going through the roof. You're in constant survival mode, and that is just going to affect the health and the whole human
well-being.
And
I can even say that, 3 times this week I've talked to people who are friends of mine who've called and said, my next door neighbor died and her son was living with her, and he is unable to live by himself, and now the lights are off and the water is off and he's over there and they're gonna put the house on the market. That's the friend, right, that's falling into homelessness, who was once living with his mother in Belmead, or in, probably not Belmead, but West Nashville or wherever, right? And I've had that call 3 times this week. 3 times that has happened with people because their parents have passed away and that's who their main provider was. And like Bobby said, we all know people who've experienced addiction things, right? We all know people who have had health complications or who lost a job, but they're not all experiencing homelessness. And that community safety net that is so important for everyone to have. It's why we are able to take risks, right? It's why we are sitting where we are, that we've had really strong communities around us. And so that's one of the main things too, bringing communities together. And one thing I'd say that I just want to give huge props to Judy about is that when I first started doing this work, we were doing it in silos. Everybody was sort of doing their own thing. And Judy has really worked tirelessly to make sure that we're all collaborating, right? So that we can come up with the data and say, here's where we are. If we all collaborate, we can make this work together.
All right, well, that kind of sets the table for the discussion, and it's an important one. If you're on the line, hold on. Reverend Fuzz, Kevin, Jeff, others, hold on. And if you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.